Whether you're brand new to the Elder Scrolls Online, trying out healing for the first time, or maybe returning after a break, there can be a lot to learn or relearn. I've got a ton of videos on my channel that I think do a pretty good job of helping out new and veteran healers alike, some of which will be linked in the description, but sometimes it's nice to sit down, watch one video, and walk away feeling like you've got a strong foundation. So, my name's Doc, your host for all things healing, and I wanted to bring you a very general healing guide covering many things I've talked about on the channel before and some things that I haven't. Without further ado, let's start by talking about what healers actually do in ESO. Well, I'm sure it will come to absolutely no one's surprise that the first and top priority of a healer in ESO is to keep their team alive through healing. Wow, shocking, I know, yes. A healer's primary duty is to provide enough healing and or shielding for their team to survive encounters with enemies. There are a plethora of skills, sets, and more to help us achieve this goal, but we'll get to that in a later section. One thing about ESO, though, is that healers do more than just heal. A healer's secondary duty is what I simply like to call utility, which means providing things like buffs to your teammates, debuffs to your enemies, helping your team sustain their resources through sets and synergies, and much more. See, one of my favorite parts of being a healer is that there is a low skill floor and a high skill ceiling. What I mean is that it's very easy, very easy, to be a good healer, but it's difficult to be a great one. The healer's primary role of keeping the team alive is generally going to be very easy. That's mainly because even an average healing build is going to provide far more than enough healing to keep your teammates alive. Sure, you're going to have some damage dealers who will stand in a big red circle and die, but that's not on you. If you can keep a relatively competent team alive through your healing, then you are a good healer. The secondary responsibility of things like buffs, debuffs, etc. is where skilled and knowledgeable healers can really shine, and it's why I consider healing to have a pretty high skill ceiling. A good healer will keep the team alive. A great healer will do that, but also help the team to hit harder, take less damage, give them ultimate charge, etc. Now, if you're brand new to ESO, you probably don't understand terms like synergies or ultimates yet, and that's okay, because I'll get to that. Let's go ahead and move on to the first thing that every new healer does in ESO, picking our race and class. So the first of two choices you'll make before you even pick up a restoration staff is your race. There are 10 total playable races that you can choose from, each having their own passive skills that improve your stats in one way or another. One important thing to note about race is that, race is not that important. It's a great way to min-max your characters and squeeze out that just little extra bit of efficiency, but your race will not make or break your build. If you have a certain role-playing vision for what you want your character to be, then I'm here to tell you to pick whatever race you want. Now, if you would like to min-max and simply be the best healer that you can be, allow me to briefly go over a quick tier list for the best and worst races for healer. I won't go super in-depth into each individual race and their passives because I do have a dedicated video for that if you're interested. This will be more of a what's good for healers and what's not kind of quick breakdown. Just keep in mind that this list is mainly focused on PvE or player versus environment, and not so much for PvP or player versus player. Okay, so in the S tier, we have Bretons for their excellent resource sustain and magical resistance, and Nords for their ultimate generation and resistances. In the A tier, we have Argonians for their extra healing and stronger potions, and High Elves for their extra spell damage and sustain. In the B tier, we have Dark Elves for their increased resources, and Khajiit for their increased recovery and crit. In the C tier, we have Imperials for reducing the resource cost of every ability, Red Guards for reducing the resource cost of specifically weapon abilities, and Orcs for their extra spell damage and self-healing. And then in the D tier, we have Wood Elf because they literally do not bring anything that will be useful to us as healers. Now, if you watch or have watched that old video I posted for the race tier list, you may notice some things have moved around a bit. If you're wondering which tier list is most up to date, it's this one. Of course, if you have any questions about anything specifically, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments. Now, on to our class. So, thanks to a system that I'll be going over in just a little while called subclassing, your base class isn't quite as important as it used to be prior to June of 2026. However, there are some caveats that do make your base class still somewhat important, and it's quite a bit more of an important choice than your race. Each base class in the game will have access to 3 unique skill lines. A lot of these skills will not be relevant to us as healers, but there are plenty of great skills and passives that we can utilize from class lines as healers. So, let's go over another quick tier list, this one being for base classes. Please keep in mind that I'm making this list with subclassing in mind and basing this off of how many different scenarios and builds can this base class comfortably fit into. Like with the race tier list, I also do have a base class tier list video that breaks this down much further if you'd like to check that out. In the S tier, we have Nightblades for just being a universally good class for every healing build. Then we also have Wardens for having access to one of the strongest buffs in the game that is exclusive to Wardens. In the A tier, we have Templar for their strong heals and versatility, and Necromancers for having access to something a healer can make use of in all 3 skill lines. In the B tier, we have Arcanists for strong shielding and sustain. In the C tier, we have Sorcerers for decent utility and ult cost reduction. And in the D tier, we have Dragon Knights for, unfortunately, having most of its useful healing abilities covered by tanks already. Again, if you saw my dedicated video, you may have noticed that the placements of Warden and Necromancer were swapped. The main reason I did that is simply because Necro is not a very new player-friendly class, and I do think this video will be more enticing to those who are newer to ESO rather than veteran players. From here, your journey into Tamriel begins. A question I often see from my fellow healers is, how do I level up? Or what should I do? And it's a very valid question. ESO doesn't necessarily always do an amazing job at pointing you in the right direction and telling you what you should be doing. Personally, this is what I would do. I would not do any power leveling method unless you're already an experienced player. The reason being is because there's a currency in this game that matters far more than XP, and that's skill points. Skill points are used to buy skills and passives from class lines, weapon skill lines, and more. For healers, having a large pool of skills and passives that you can use in different scenarios can make you a very competitive pick for a raid group or a PvP team. As a newer player starting at level 1, you should begin going through each zone and gathering skill points. How do you do this? Again, I've got a video on my channel for it, but here's a quick version. Complete zone quests, which are the storylines of each zone, gather sky shards, which are the glowing blue crystals you can find scattered throughout each zone, defeat public dungeon event bosses, and complete the quests in group dungeons. Now, you may be thinking, hey doc, I'm a healer. My damage will be so low that this will take forever. Well, allow me to give you a friendly tip. There's a system in the game called the Armory system, which are essentially loadouts. It will give you a snapshot of your current build, and you can swap between builds whenever you're not in combat. Everyone should be able to grab an armory station from the Crown Store for free that you can place in your in-game house when you obtain one. That way, you can swap between your healer build and whatever solo or DPS build that you can find from Skinny Cheeks or Hyperioxes or whoever your go-to DPS guy is. As you progress through the game, gathering skill points and earning levels, you're going to hit some certain level milestones. Allow me just to cover a few of the big ones that you should be on the lookout for. At level 10, you'll unlock the Daily Dungeon and Battleground Finder. Dungeons are 4-player activities that task you with progressing through a level, defeating groups of small enemies, and then a few boss encounters. Battlegrounds are small contained instances of PvP with game modes like Capture the Flag, Domination, and Deathmatch. The first time you complete each of these per day, you'll get a large XP bonus as well as some other rewards. At level 15, you unlock your second weapon bar, giving you access to another set of skills and an ultimate that you can equip. At level 30, you'll gain access to Scribing, which is an in-game system that I'll go over here in a few minutes. At level 45, you unlock access to DLC dungeons, which are going to be a bit harder than the ones you're used to up to this point. You'll also gain access to Undaunted Pledges. These are daily quests that change each day and task you with completing certain dungeons. I highly recommend doing these when you get the chance and have some time, because those keys that you earn from completing pledges give you access to buying some armor pieces that are exclusive to the Undaunted Enclave. At level 50, the game really opens up. You gain access to veteran difficulty as well as the champion point system. From here on out, instead of gaining levels, you gain champion points, which you can use to get passive bonuses in a plethora of areas. You also gain access to the subclassing system, which, again, I'll go over here pretty shortly. And at CP or champion point 160, this will be your last hard milestone. There are other champion point soft milestones, but CP 160 is the last majorly important milestone. Once you hit CP 160, you've reached the gear cap, meaning the gear you acquire will not reach a higher level than this. What this means for you, the player, is that it's time to start developing some builds and acquire some gear that you're going to stick with for the foreseeable future. And speaking of builds, it's time that we dive more into some of the things that a healer will want to bring. I want to start by talking about a couple important game systems, those being scribing and subclassing that I mentioned a couple minutes ago. Scribing is a form of spellcrafting that allows you to customize certain abilities within the game to do specific things. If you're interested in how to begin scribing, you probably won't be surprised to know that I do have a video dedicated to it. When it comes to scribing, healers don't use it too terribly often, in my experience. However, I did want to mention it because if you're interested in getting into PvP healing, you'll find some very strong options in there that I use in nearly all of my PvP healing builds. Subclassing, on the other hand, is a system that allows you to trade out certain skill lines from your class to gain access to skill lines of another class. This is a fantastic tool to maximize your healing output, resource sustain, buffs, debuffs, and much more. I won't sit here and break down my ranking of every single skill line because I already have a video on my channel going over that. Instead, I did just want to mention some notable skill lines that you'll typically find healers using. We've got Siphoning from the Nightblade, Green Balance from the Warden, Restoring Light from the Templar, Curative Runiforms from the Arcanist, Living Death from the Necromancer, and Daedric Summoning from the Sorcerer. Up next, when it comes to individual skills and buffs, obviously we have a ton of options, and a lot of it will depend on your specific build, encounter, etc. I do have plenty of build videos on my channel if you want a more focused guide on exactly what to bring and when. However, there are some very common things that healers are expected to bring in nearly every build. Please keep in mind that not every healer is going to bring every single one of these every single time. These are just common skills to be on the lookout for as you're leveling and prepping your character. First up, we have Combat Prayer from the Restoration Staff skill line, and it provides the Minor Berserk and Minor Resolve buffs while also giving your teammates a burst of healing. Then we have the Combustion Synergy, a synergy that teammates can activate to restore resources to themselves, most commonly found on the Energy Orb from the Undaunted skill line, but can also be sourced from Luminous Shards and the Templar's Aedric Spear skill line. We have Overflowing Altar from the Undaunted. This provides AoE minor lifesteal as well as a synergy that restores a ton of health. Then we have Radiating Regeneration from the Restoration Staff, a strong heal over time, or HOT, HOT for short, that sticks to your allies wherever they go. Next is Echoing Vigor from the Assault skill line, another strong heal over time that can also be useful if you ever need an assault skill for certain sets. Up next is Elemental Blockade from the Destruction Staff. This is mainly used to proc your backbar enchantment and provide some sort of useful debuff for your team. Next up is Reviving Barrier from the Support skill line. This is a strong defensive ultimate that also gives you some extra recovery through support passives. Up next is Aggressive Warhorn from the Assault skill line, a strong offensive ultimate that provides teammates with major force, which increases their critical damage. Then we've got Minor Intellect and Endurance. This is a resource recovery buff that you can find from a ton of different sources. It'll never be too hard to find this one. Up next is Major Courage, a weapon and spell damage buff most commonly found from the Spell Power Cure set, but can also be sourced from Olorime. Up next is Major Slayer, a percentage-based damage buff that's commonly found on the Rojo setup or the Master Architect set. Then, finally, we have Ultimate Generation, and this just means like any way of providing ultimate to yourself or your team. Now, obviously, there are plenty of things that I did not cover here, but I didn't want to overwhelm you. This should be enough to have a good starting point in understanding just how many things healers are expected to provide. One little side bit I want to mention is that a lot of our heals, and I mean a lot of them, can cover a pretty wide area or hit multiple people. When practicing with your skills and setting up your skills, don't forget to make sure that you can see the majority of your teammates, especially your tank, so that you can hit as many people as possible when healing. But you also don't want to be too terribly far from your team. You'll figure it out. But I do think it's time that we move on to talking about some other aspects of our healer, starting with our attributes. As you're leveling, you may notice that you're gaining points that you can put towards your magicka, health, or stamina. I can confidently tell you that in PvE, you're going to want to put all of those points into magicka 99% of the time as a healer. The reason we do this is because when we have a higher pool of magicka, we get a few benefits. We can cast more spells, our magicka recovery is more useful, and we have stronger healing. That's right. Increasing your maximum magicka gives you stronger healing, and actually more damage. There are a couple other things that also impact how our healing actually gets stronger. Our healing can critically strike our allies, though I personally would not recommend ever building into this because it's not really worth it. Another thing that increases our healing is anything that improves our weapon and spell damage. This means that enchantments, buffs, and more can all have an impact on our healing while helping us do a little more damage. Some of my build choices after learning how heal scaling works will hopefully make a little more sense now that you know that. Another important aspect of our healer is our Mundus Stone. These are standing stones found throughout various parts of Tamriel that give us a permanent stat increase. Though we can only hold one at a time unless you're using a certain set, there are two main contenders for the best healer Mundus Stone. Those being the Ritual, which provides us with stronger healing, and the Atronach, which provides us with more magicka recovery. Which one you need just kind of depends on your playstyle and your build. Personally, I tend to run the Atronach more often than not. I tend to be a bit on the higher side in terms of casts per minute or CPM. In other words, I'm casting my spells pretty quickly and pretty often. Being able to cast an extra burst heal or reposition an AoE is more beneficial to me than bigger healing numbers. For those with a CPM on the lower side, or if your build already has a ton of recovery, such as maybe a Rojo build, you may not need the extra recovery, and maybe stronger healing numbers is what you need instead. But either way, up next, you'll want to know about buff food. It's simply just a consumable that you can eat to gain a stat buff for a couple hours. For healers, especially if you're a new healer, I always recommend some sort of food that increases your max health, magicka, and magicka recovery. This gives you a fantastic balance of survivability, sustain, and healing output. The strongest buff food you can get in this category is easily the Clockwork Citrus Fillet, which you can find from a questline in the Clockwork City DLC. For a much easier and much cheaper option that you can get today, I highly recommend the Witch Mother's Potent Brew, which can be found on Guild Traders. It's a budget option of the Clockwork Citrus Fillet, but in my opinion, nearly just as powerful. Up next is our potions. These are consumables that you can use to restore resources in combat and give yourself useful buffs. This will mostly depend on your build, but a safe bet is either heroism potions, which will give you minor heroism to generate some ultimate for yourself, or the spell power potion, which will grant you some buffs that increase your spell damage and spell critical, leading to stronger heals. The materials for the heroism potion come primarily from hunting dragons and elsewhere, so if you're a newer player or don't have access to elsewhere, it will probably make more sense for you to stick with spell power pots for now. And up next, I want to talk about champion points. As I mentioned previously, these are points that you earn by gaining levels after level 50. You can spend these points in 3 trees. Blue tends to focus on offensive stats, red tends to focus on defensive, and green is your utility. We're not too concerned with the green tree for the purposes of this video, since that tree mostly focuses on out-of-combat stuff. In each of these trees, there are 2 types of points, those being passive and slottable. We're going to be focusing on the slottables, since those are going to be the most impactful, and you're going to be limited to only 4 slottables per tree, whereas passives have no limit. For our blue tree, the slottables I tend to focus on are Swift Renewal to increase the strength of our heal over time skills, Soothing Tide to increase the strength of our AoE heals, Enlivening Overflow to give everyone some increased recovery, and From the Brink to give our low health allies a large damage shield before they go down. For our red tree, I like to go with Boundless Vitality for extra health, Fortified for extra armor, Rejuvenation for extra recovery, and then either Slippery, Expert Evasion, or Celerity. They all involve keeping us mobile, but which one you choose will just most likely come down to what content you're doing. Up next, let's talk about armor sets. There are several armor sets in the game that can be useful for healers, and having several or all of them at the ready can make you valuable everywhere you go. Before you hit CP 160, I wouldn't worry about holding on to any gear you actually acquire, though I would make sure to bind every piece of gear you can get your hands on to your account. Once you do hit CP 160, though, you can either farm your desired sets from their respective area, or you can check to see if you've already acquired them in your collections. If you want to simply reconstruct it, you can use a transmutation station found in the Clockwork City, or you can buy one from the Crown Store to reconstruct it at your current level, which is hopefully CP 160 by the time you're doing this. There are a few types of armor that I'll be talking about today. You've got your standard 5-piece sets, you've got your 2-piece monster sets, which are just head and shoulder sets, in which you can find the headpiece from the corresponding veteran dungeon, and the shoulders can be bought with undaunted keys. You've got arena weapons, which are weapons found from arenas. Who would have thought? And these provide a benefit by themselves. Then you've got mythics, which are found using the antiquities system and also provide a benefit by themselves, though there is usually some sort of trade-off to using these. However, some common sets to look out for include Spell Power Cure. Found in the White Gold Tower dungeon, this set provides major courage, which increases weapon and spell damage. Powerful Assault, which is found in the Imperial City or bought from guild traders and can grant a unique weapon and spell damage buff. Master Architect, found in the Halls of Fabrication Trial, this set grants Major Slayer when we cast our ultimate, depending on how much ultimate we cast. Roaring Opportunist, found in the Kind's Aegis Trial, this set grants Major Slayer when heavy attacking. Yorvold's Guidance, found in the Scalecaller Peak dungeon, this set extends the duration of buffs and debuffs that we apply. Pillager's Prophet, found in the Dreadsail Reef Trial, this set grants our allies ultimate when we cast our own ultimate. Ozazen the Inferno, a monster set tied to the Scrivener's Hall dungeon, this set grants minor vitality and increased armor. Symphony of Blades, a monster set tied to the Depths of Malatar dungeon, this grants our allies resources when they run low. The Master's Restoration Staff, aka Grand Rejuvenation, it's found in the Dragonstar Arena and grants allies resources when you cast the Grand Healing skill. Black Rose Prison Restoration Staff, aka Mender's Ward, found in the Black Rose Prison Arena, it grants major vitality to allies who are affected by your Steadfast Ward skill. And Pearls of Elnathay, a mythic item found from the Antiquity system, it grants you major heroism when casting a healing skill while your highest maximum resource is under 50%. Obviously, this is not a completely comprehensive list of every set and item that could be useful to healers, but that should cover everything you'll need for 99% of all the content in this game. When it comes to weights, you've got a few options. Most of your popular healing sets will only drop in light, but since monster sets can drop in light, medium, and heavy, you can mix and match a little bit to meet your goals. Most commonly, you'll find healers using 5 light and 2 medium, or 6 light and 1 medium, or maybe even all light if you need the extra recovery. Honestly though, I'm still a 5 light, 1 medium, and 1 heavy enjoyer myself. I know it's not the most perfectly optimal setup anymore, but I still think it's a strong, well-rounded general setup, and that is a hill that I will die on. While we're on the topic of armor and weapons, let's talk about traits and enchantments. For our armor, I like to use the Divine's trait to increase the potency of our Mundus Stone and all max magicka enchantments to boost our magicka numbers a bit. For jewelry, it depends a bit on your build, but there are several options that are good. If you just want a generally good on most builds setup, I'd recommend the Arcane trait and the Magicka recovery enchantments. Again, there are other options that I talk about in my build videos, but you won't go wrong with those. For our restoration staff, I'd recommend using the powered trait and the absorb magicka enchantment. Then, for our destruction staff, I'd recommend the infused trait with the crusher enchantment. Like with our jewelry, there are alternative options that may change with specific builds, but those are just the very generally good with a lot of different builds options. And up next, I want to briefly talk about some common terms and abbreviations you may hear people say or request of a healer. That way, when someone mentions it in chat or Discord or Group Finder or whatever, you feel prepared to react. So, HPS is healing per second, HOT is heal over time, AoE is area of effect, Sticky means healing that sticks to an ally and heals them even when they're on the move. Synergy is an additional effect found on some skills in the game that must be activated by yourself or a teammate. Rojo is the combination of the Roaring Opportunist and Yorvold's Guidance sets, which is a common build that you'll see in trial groups. Slayer Stacks refers to a strategy utilizing sets like Master Architect and War Machine to maximize the uptime of the major Slayer buff. Ultigen, usually referring to a build that focuses on maximizing the amount of ultimate you generate. Ulti-Spam, usually referring to a build that focuses on maximizing the amount of ultimates you cast per minute. Kite Healing is a specific kind of healer role that focuses on baiting or kiting out certain mechanics from a boss due to their positioning. Tomb Healing is a specific role of a healer that involves a heal check mechanic called Frost Tombs or Frost Bombs, depending on what trial you're doing. And up next, I do want to dive a little deeper into Kite and Tomb Healing, because it's not something that I've really talked about on the channel much. As I mentioned just a minute ago, Kite Healing and Tomb Healing are two very common mechanics you'll see healers interact with in a trial setting. Kite Healing usually involves positioning yourself in a way that you're the furthest person from the boss. The reason that we do this is because there are some bosses who have mechanics that specifically target the furthest player from them. People like Zamaja from Cloud Rest, Oxilso and Rockgrove, and many more. There aren't many things I usually change about my build to Kite Heal. For the most part, it's more so a positioning thing. You just want to make sure that you're far enough away from the boss so that they'll target you, while also still being able to hit your team with important healing and buffs. But if you are looking to change something about your build to be a specifically better Kite Healer, I'd recommend going with things that increase your movement speed. Swift Jewelry or the Steed Mundus usually do the trick. Outside of that, it's important just to learn the positioning and hope that your team knows how to position themselves too. Tomb Healing requires a bit more finesse in higher difficulties. It's pretty brain dead easy on normal, but if you ever tackle any hard mode trials, Tomb Healing can be difficult, even for me, I won't lie. It's essentially a heal check that tasks you with healing a teammate up to full health in a short time period. If you don't, someone's gonna die. More than anything, this will require a build with a strong healing output and a specific buff that makes things 10 times easier for you. That buff is called Major Vitality, and it drastically increases the amount of healing that someone takes. There are several ways of applying this to your teammates, but I think the most efficient is to use the Black Rose Prison Restoration Staff known as Mender's Ward, paired with the Healing Ward skill. Just wait for your target to be hit with the frost damage, then apply Healing Ward, and pump out as much healing as you possibly can. If you don't have access to Mender's Ward and need a quick substitute, I also like using the Wield Soul Scribe skill. You can put a heal over time, and Major Vitality on that one single skill, making it a great backup option. One last thing that I wanted to touch on before we wrap all this up is add-ons. Once upon a time, only PC players had access to add-ons, but now that console players have access to add-ons, it seems like a great time to talk about them. I do actually already have a video covering add-ons. However, I don't have one that's up to date as of 2026. I know, I'm so sorry. If you go watch that though, you'll get most of what you need to know. I do, however, plan to make a video updating that one soon, as there were a few changes between then and now that I've made to my add-ons. Until then though, what you're seeing right now is simply just a list of every add-on that I currently have installed, both active and inactive. A lot of these will not necessarily pertain to healers and are just for things like doing writs or making potions or finding things on the map and stuff like that. However, anything you see that covers combat or UI, like Code's combat alerts, Azura, Merlin's heal helper, Srendar, Fancy Action Bar, Hodor, etc., are all great things to really step up your healing game. Again, I'm not going to go too in-depth in this specific video just because I do want this to be a general overview, and I plan to update that add-on video very soon. So finally, you may be asking yourself, Doc, that was a lot. How do I put all this together? Well, fortunately for you, I've got a plethora of builds, tips, all sorts of things on my channel that go much more in-depth with specifically what you'll choose and why and what to do and when and all sorts of things of that nature. In fact, I actually have 2 specific videos that cover all of my builds. One video covers subclass builds and the other covers pure class builds. I don't have builds for every single specific scenario yet, but the videos on my channel that I do have will easily cover you for the vast majority of content in the game and give you the tools to be a phenomenal healer. Of course, on top of that, if you ever have any questions about anything that I've covered in this video or things that I haven't, don't hesitate to ask. I'm here to help, and I'm more than happy to help. It's literally why I do this. If I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer, or I'll find someone who knows the answer, so don't be shy. Finally, just a reminder that this is a very broad overview. I did my best to cover as much as I possibly could, but there will be some things that I inevitably miss or not explain quite as in-depth as I should, or maybe me speaking about it just doesn't quite do it justice. This video was meant more so to give you a strong foundation as a healer that you can build off of and continue to grow, not be the only healing video that you'll ever need to watch ever, though I hope that it did a good job of being mostly the healing video that you need to watch. And I think that'll do it for Doc's complete guide to healing in the Elder Scrolls Online. I think this was undoubtedly my biggest project yet, so I really hope you guys enjoy it and find it useful. Even if you've been around the channel for a while now, I still hope you found something of value in this video. Don't forget to check out the link in the description so you can follow me on stuff and join my Discord server, and check out some of those other healing videos that I've posted. Before we head out, I also want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons and YouTube members. Thank you guys for being awesome, and I appreciate y'all. I think all I've got left to say is that I've been Doc. Take care of yourselves, be good to others, happy healing, and I will catch y'all in the next one. Okay, I'm gonna go get some water now. Bye, everyone.